So if that's the attitude of prayers and thoughts is something like is a superstitious religious thing, it's not going to do anything. But for those who do believe in God and do have a personal relationship with God, what my prayer, my prayer is to go for the big request. The big request is this: a massive spiritual awakening in our civilization and society. I see the politicians aren't going to save us. Laws just continue to increase until you're essentially living in a penitentiary like in North Korea, where you're constantly surveyed all day and all night to make sure you comply with the government, 1984 style. And I just read an article on the kind of screening that's coming up in China right now that's actually implemented the app. And it was on the news 2 days ago. And wow, like, okay, it's brought in to be justified. We want to stamp out this disease, but you can really see where this is going to go real fast. If you want to make your civilization that's declining morally, if you want to make them behave, and you don't want any kind of a spiritual awakening, you don't want God involved, then what you're going to have to do is increase the laws and increase the surveillance and restrict the freedoms more and more, so that every person eventually is monitored 24/7 some way by a chip or whatever, so that the algorithms know exactly where you are, what you're doing, and that you're staying within this window of what the government permits. That's the ultimate destiny of humanity without God. But the irony of it all is that Jesus said that he just gave 2 laws. So God has only 2 laws for humanity: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the key thing. But real life says people are not going to love their neighbors themselves. They're always going to be looking for loopholes, and thus we're going to have government making yet more and more laws. The more people don't love their neighbor, the more laws will be required, the more freedom is constrained, and it's a horrible situation. Now, Serpa points out here of something very true, that revival depends on people who claim to be Christians, let's say believers. First of all, there are a lot of people who claim to be believers but really aren't. But the real believers, we ourselves have our own issues. Are we honest with God? I mean, you're bang on, Serpa. This is why I think it's up to the believers to, first of all, ask God, examine me. Have I got problems? Because I'm pretty sure I do. To think you got no problems is just plain naive. I got problems. I want God to work in my heart, but I also ask him, God, we need a massive spiritual awakening in our civilization, big time, because my faith in government was lost a few decades back. I think government's important to fulfill its simple roles, but to save us as a civilization, not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Because human nature exists within government as well.
Human nature is our problem. So it's not that human nature is just an outcome of our society. No, our society is the cumulative effect of cumulative human natures that form that society. That's been my thought on where our society goes. The environment is a product of the human natures that form that environment, not the other way around. So there is no such thing as basically a long-lasting utopia here on Earth, as long as you got real people living in it. But there's certainly, you can have better cultures, better improvements. The closer a society actually follows those 2 great commands of Christ, actually loves their neighbor. Now, that's another thing. Don't assume you can love your neighbor. That's one thing I apply to myself. I'm old enough now to say, forget it. Like I love the people that I enjoy being with, but it does not come naturally to actually care and have compassion for somebody who's not so good in the society. What about that guy who did the shooting? What about him? Were there Christians around who sincerely cared for him? Are you watching out for those people who don't seem to have friends, who seem to be ostracized by society, who seem to be discriminated against? Are you actually sensitive and aware of these people? When I say you, I'm saying that as a blanket question to our civilization today, and to especially every believer, every person who claims to follow Christ. We have to care and have compassion. And you know what? There certainly has to be enough Christians, even if it's only 2 or 3%, say in his own high school. And I don't want to be too hard on that. I know high school life is hard and teen life is hard. But man, if the Christians in any given high school, and if we all just watched out for people who are struggling and people who have mental health challenges, and we just came around them and did whatever we could just to be friends with them, at least just to be friends and talk with them and find out more about them and do kind things for them. You know, that guy, I'm sure there were Christians who could have done that, but maybe just, you know how it is. We're all busy. We all go about our life.
I do know, I believe it was Columbine, which was sort of the first major news. It had happened before, but there were a few of the girls that were killed there because they were Christians. And so even though they tried, it didn't help.